Hey, you're listening to the Smoke Meat Podcast. I'm your host, Brad Pittman. Smoke Meat's brought to you by Joe's Underground at the corner of 8th and Broad in Augusta, Georgia. Such a great place. So many great people there. One hell of a party. Everybody needs to just sit down and have a drink together right now, just to kind of pause and reset, you know. And Joe's is a perfect place to do it. They make you feel like family from the first time you walk in there. I love me some Joe's. I goes to Joe's, and so should you. At the corner of 8th and Broad in Augusta, Georgia, in the bottom of the Lamar building. Today my guest is Mr. Steve Stoliar. Steve has had such an interesting life. Right out of college, he became the assistant for the late, great comedy great Groucho Marx. I just couldn't imagine, you know, being an assistant to that. Somebody that's had that much impact in comedy and entertainment. And he got to do it at a young age and got to learn a lot. He's written for TV. He has done several documentaries and written a great book called Raised Eyebrows. So without further ado, we're going to go on ahead and kick off this talk with Mr. Steve. Hey, Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. How about yourself?
Man, if I was any better, I'd be twins.
I would say you could say that again, but then you'd say that again.
That again.
See?
Oh, yeah. Well, man, when I first got introduced to you, I thought this guy is so interesting. I mean, the things you have done over the years, I mean, especially right out of college. I mean, just...
It's very misleading. I'm actually quite dull.
No. But you see, you can still be dull and do cool things. That's the neat part of it. You're a walking enigma.
Well, but I'm seated at present.
Oh, you're killing me. You're a seated enigma.
I think there's a vaccine for seated enigma, but I don't have access to it right now.
Well,
yes, all seriousness aside, as Steve Allen liked to say, even in college, I got a remarkable break in that I got to be able to meet and work for the man who had been my idol for years, Groucho Marx of the famous Marx Brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just an astonishing experience to be dropped into that atmosphere at the age of 19, working in his house for the last 3 years of his life, and getting to know my hero in his waning years. Just an astonishing treasure of an experience.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people today, you know, kind of know the Marx Brothers, but don't really know them.
Right.
And they were pioneers. I mean, they paved the way for a lot of people today. You know.
Yeah, I've gotten past being surprised when people under 50 have trouble placing the name. Although, of course, when I was growing up, the Marx Brothers films were not current. You know, they're from the 30s and early 40s. But somehow my friends and I gravitated towards them, and we would seek them out in late-night local television, willing ourselves to stay awake past Carson and past the Tomorrow Show into the netherworld of car commercials and local spots, and then finally catch up with Horse Feathers and Duck Soup and Monkey Business. But we all, you know, especially the baby boomers, really embraced the irreverence and anarchy of the Marx Brothers and W.C. Fields and Mae West back in the 60s and 70s. There was sort of a renaissance of interest in those particular comedians. But now it has been, you know, decades since they were gone, and there are so many other ways for younger people to get information between streaming video and YouTube and platforms and all that stuff that I guess it asks a lot of them to sit still to watch a black and white movie that was made in 1931 when there's cartoons and concerts and everything else imaginable just with the press of a button now. Back then we either had to, as I say, look through the TV guide and then stay up till 2:48 a.m. to catch a screening of something, or if we were lucky at a revival house or in a film class or at a museum. But now everything is there. It's an interesting dichotomy, because while it's literally a touch away to catch one of these movies, I think fewer younger people are aware of them because there is so much to choose from. So it's gotten easier to see them, but that doesn't mean they're seeing them.
Yeah, like I say, a lot of people, you can say Groucho, and everybody does the little cigar thing, right. But they don't understand what they did. Like I say, back then they were hardcore. I mean, everything was new. And the things they did were just...
Yeah, Groucho breaking the fourth wall, stopping the action and turning to the camera and speaking to the audience in the theater was unheard of back in the late 20s and early 30s. And in fact, the producers said, you can't talk to the audience. You can do that on Broadway and in vaudeville, which they were doing for years before film. That made sense. But to look into the camera and talk to the audience, that doesn't make any sense. You can't do that.
Yeah.
And, in their first film, The Coconuts, there's a love song, and the producer said, well, we have to show the orchestra playing the music because the audience is going to want to know where the music's coming from. When it's a stage show, they know there's an orchestra pit with musicians, but in a movie, where are the violins coming from? They'll wonder if they're behind the screen. So this was the infancy of talking films, but Groucho saw no reason why he couldn't just turn to the camera and say, I have to stay here. There's no reason why you can't go into the lobby till this blows over. And now it's nothing for comedians to in sitcoms and movies and stuff, to stop and turn and say things to the audience. But that was not the case when Groucho started doing it. There was a lot of concern that they were also concerned about him wearing the grease paint mustache in movies, saying you can get away with that on stage because people are sitting a distance away, but in movies there's close-ups and they're going to see you're wearing a grease paint mustache, so you can't. And he just sort of brushed past them, realizing that if their success is contingent on having credible mustaches, then they got bigger problems than grease paint.
Exactly. Yeah, I've always heard, never meet your heroes, because they may not live up to what you're expecting. Yeah. And to be there for 3 years.
I've had really good luck so far.
Yeah.
I can't think of one time that I've met a hero that ended up being a big letdown. And I mean, Fred Astaire and Dick Cavett and Woody Allen and, Groucho, as I mentioned, those have all been really positive experiences, in most cases leading to friendships that have endured. So either I have good taste in heroes, or I must bring something to the table that doesn't annoy them or send them away. But that is often true about people. And the thing about being a celebrity is they have to be careful. If they're in a bad mood and someone comes up to them and wants an autograph or something, and they have a headache or something like that, and they turn them down, then that person goes home and says, so-and-so was really rude, really mean to me. That's just, they have to be careful, because the image, they have to decide, do I want to please the audience? Then there were people that didn't care, like Katharine Hepburn.
Mm-hmm.
someone asked for her autograph, and she turned them down, and the guy said, "I made you what you are." And she said, "Like hell you did." But it's an interesting dynamic between fans, the public, and the... I was talking to Jay Leno once about interaction with the public and, making an impression and how you comport yourself. And he said he was talking to Garth Brooks about that. And Garth Brooks told him about a time when he was eating alone in a restaurant, and afterwards he went into the bathroom, into one of the stalls, and locked the stall and dropped his pants, and immediately he hears on the door, and he figures, oh, did I leave my credit card or something? So he leans forward and undoes the latch and opens it a little, and a hand thrusts a piece of paper and a pencil, and a guy said, "I didn't want to bother you while you were eating."
Classy. Very classy.
That's the kind of logic that fans will sometimes have, so it's easy to see why sometimes celebrities will bristle at the interaction. But as I say, I have had remarkable luck meeting my heroes and getting to know them, and I wrote a book about my experiences with Groucho called Raised Eyebrows: My Years Inside Groucho's House, and it's available in paperback and Kindle and audiobook with me doing all the voices on Amazon, and is being developed as a motion picture, which is not a biography of Groucho per se. It's just focusing on my experiences, this naive kid dropped into this stimulating atmosphere with his aging hero, and then there was this woman who was in charge of Groucho's life in his last years named Erin Fleming, who was very volatile and mercurial and very difficult to deal with. And so I had to do a lot of growing up in a short amount of time. So the book and the film will deal with just basically the interaction of those three main people, and then obviously other people in the household and famous people who came by. I got to meet so many stimulating people working there, and because I was on the inside, they didn't question my legitimacy. They didn't know if I was Groucho's grandson, or they figured there was some reason I was there. So I was able to comfortably chat with them at the lunch table or in the living room or something like that. But I got to meet Mae West and Jack Lemmon and Bob Hope and Steve Allen and George Burns and some of Groucho's writers, Nat Perrin and S.J. Perelman, and some of Groucho's directors, people from You Bet Your Life, George Fenneman. It really was just an amazing ride for 3 years. And, there are the darker elements of getting close to my hero while he's fading out and putting up with the aforementioned Erin Fleming. But it was more than compensated for by the quality time I was able to spend getting to know Groucho. And, even though he was older and had had strokes and heart problems and health problems, there was still some element of the classic Groucho that stayed all the way through to the end. And it was always gratifying when I would say something and then he would kind of twist it and hand it back to me. He allowed me to do a video in his living room one day for a school project, and as we were wrapping things up, I said, "Groucho, I can't possibly thank you enough." And he said, "Sure you can. Don't take a salary." He loved getting the Hollywood trade papers to keep up on what was happening, in show business, and I would bring him the mail and the trade papers, and then at the lunch table he would sort of review what he had gotten in the mail. And one day he said, "Wonderful mail you brought me, nothing but requests for money." And I said, "But you got the variety, didn't you?" And he said, "Yes, a variety of requests for money," which was just as he would have phrased it, in the 20s or 30s. So I think it was just a reflexive mechanism with him. There was no audience. There was just me. But that was good enough. And so it was always great when there would be flashes of that classic Groucho, even as he was winding down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's some of these names that you've mentioned, I mean, it's just, I couldn't imagine, and even though some of them were in their heyday then, and some of them may have been like Groucho was, fading a little bit, that's history, and that's just so amazing. I've had people on my show who haven't been, in anything in a long time, but some of the things they've done in the past are so amazing, and so just they made.
And not just the celebrities.
Yeah.
But I also appreciate, I've been a lifelong history buff.
Yeah.
And Groucho was born in 1890, so he was a literal Victorian. And his first-hand memories went from before the Wright brothers to after the moon landing, which is just a staggering stretch of American history.
Yeah.
And I asked him once, "How far back can you remember?" And he thought a moment and he said, "I guess the Spanish-American War," which was 98. And I'm not sure if you know it or not, but the Marx Brothers had started out as singers in vaudeville before they started getting into comedy. And there was a special performance at the Metropolitan Opera House in New York. Enrico Caruso, amongst others, was on the bill, and Groucho sang, and proceeds from the performance went to help the victims of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake. So it was just remarkable for me to listen to his firsthand stories and comments and views and perceptions, plus knowing all these other long-gone legendary people. He was friends with George Gershwin and Irving Berlin and James Thurber and George Kaufman and Irving Thalberg and W.C. Fields, all these people that I think of in black and white in two dimensions, and he knew them as friends or co-workers. Mm-hmm. So it was just, as I keep saying, an extraordinary experience, and I never took any of it for granted. And because I was such a Marx Brothers fanatic, I went into the job knowing who people were. I don't know if you've had the experience where you meet someone in your younger years and you don't fully appreciate them, and then as you get older you think, "Oh, I wish I had known why that person was important. I would have acknowledged this or asked him this." But in my case, my brain was like a Rolodex. And so when Irving Brecker would come over, my mind would flip to Irving Brecker. He wrote At the Circus and Go West and co-created The Life of Riley and co-wrote Meet Me in St. Louis, longtime friend of Groucho's going back to the 30s. And it was great because it wasn't lost on me who all these people were from in front of and especially behind the camera.
Mm-hmm. Man, that is just so amazing. Like I say, some of these people just, and like I say, that became normal for you. You just went into work and they're like, "I wonder who I'm going to see today," or "Wonder if Bob's coming over." And I could just imagine that you're just sitting there chilling out, and all of a sudden Bob Hope walk in, or.
Yeah, it was. Bob Hope was there for Groucho's 85th birthday, and Groucho said, "Here's a man who has made me laugh," and Bob Hope said, "Oh, Groucho, you don't have to say that. And Groucho said, "If you weren't here, I wouldn't say it." And Hope chuckled and said, "It's been going on like this for 40 years." And when George Burns came over, I was nervous because I was able to appreciate Burns and Allen and all the films and radio and TV. And the doorbell rang, and I went and got it. And he's standing there smiling, and he walks in and says, "Hi, you want to live a long time? Become an actor. You'll live to be an old man like Groucho and me." "Okay, let's have lunch." And we went into the dining room, and I just sat and marveled and watched as he and Groucho talked about specific vaudeville houses they played in the teens and 20s. And I remember at the end of lunch, Burns took out a cigar and pushed it into the plastic holder and lit it up. He said, "I never smoke expensive cigars. All I care about is if it fits the holder. Now, Milton Berle, he pays $2 a piece for his cigars. If I paid that much, I'd go to bed with it before I'd smoke it." Just a delightful man. And this was right before the Sunshine Boys, but right before that whole renaissance of interest, before Oh God and all those latter films that he did. Mm-hmm. And he only got Sunshine Boys because his best friend, Jack Benny, had died of pancreatic cancer while in rehearsal to play opposite Walter Matthau. Mm-hmm. And that left an opening for the co-star, so Burns was cast and won an Oscar, and that led to that whole last big chapter of his life and career. So it was just amazing.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to reading the book. I hadn't got to yet, and it's killing me. My time's gotten so rough with all this stuff going on today. But one thing I'm looking forward to with the movie is, a lot of young people today where they won't read, they will watch a movie.
Right.
And, hopefully it'll do kind of a resurgence and expose young people to what is history.
They do enjoy it once they discover it. There is, you had mentioned not getting political, but there is the element of political correctness which drives me crazy.
Oh, that drives me
when it's
insane.
Done in a retroactive way, because people will say, "Why did Groucho have to wiggle his eyebrows and be flirtatious with that young woman? That's insensitive." Or he said insulting things. That's just not a nice thing to do. And I would think these movies are from the 30s and 40s, and his quiz show, You Bet Your Life, is from the 50s. They didn't know then that 70, 80 years later, it would fall out of fashion to be flirtatious or be interested in a much younger woman or something like that. So there are occasionally things in their movies that now people, causes a sort of sudden intake of breath because it either involves ethnicity or religions or women or something like that. And it's hard to say, please look past this and appreciate the craftsmanship and the humor. But apart from that, I think the material holds up well, and I do hope that new people... It's always gratifying to me when someone will say, my granddaughter is 9, and I ran monkey business for her, and she really was laughing at Harpo. And I think, the torch gets passed. Because when I was working for Groucho, I was the young whippersnapper. I was the teenager in blue jeans and T-shirt and Keds, and meeting these people who were skeptical that I had any idea who they were and figured I was just into rock and roll and being a hippie or something. And then they would be relieved and pleased that this young guy, and Groucho felt the same way. He once gave me a $20 bill and said, "Go down to the record store and get me some records. You know what I like." And that was so gratifying that he knew I knew what he liked.
Yeah, that is a
so now
compliment.
I'm the old man saying it's wonderful to hear that young kids are able to appreciate the Marx Brothers.
Back in my day, and I find myself doing that now, and it drives me insane. Because, I'm almost 50 years old, but inside I feel like I'm about 12. So, but, that was just the ultimate compliment for him to do that, because to me, music's real personal, and I've got, I go from Wayne Newton to Metallica on my playlist, I've got everything. And oh man, that is just so amazing that he would do that. And
yeah, just extraordinary.
And you've gone on.
I didn't think I had a book in me. For years, people would say, you should write about this. And I would think, I'm flattering myself because I was such a postscript to his life just at the end. And then one year I thought, well, maybe I could get the best stories together and write an article for Esquire or Vanity Fair or something. So I sat down to reconstruct the archaeologist in me, reconstructing the chronology of first seeing him and meeting him and getting the job and all the ups and downs after that, and I was on like page 9 and hadn't met Groucho yet, and I thought this is going to be longer than an article, and sure enough, I was able to write a book-length manuscript, and Dick Cavett wrote the introduction. Woody Allen said it's one of the best books about a show business icon he'd ever read, which floored me. That wasn't even in a Dust Jacket blurb. That was in a letter to me, and I had to ask if I could use that for the Dust Jacket, because he isn't one who frequently, you never read, I love this movie, says Woody Allen.
Yeah.
So it's generally been well received by fans and also by people who didn't know much about Groucho or the Marx Brothers, but got pulled into the story of this kid going through the looking glass and getting to meet his hero. Whether you're a Groucho fan or not, you can substitute whether it's someone in music or a sports hero or something. Imagine getting to work at that person's house and getting to know them and their friends and the pluses and minuses of that bargain.
Yeah. Yeah, and you've gone on to do a lot of cool stuff since then. I know you've written a lot for TV. Some of my favorite shows from,
Oh, thanks.
Simon and Simon. I know you did some of those. I loved that show.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. And Murder, She Wrote, and Sliders, and the new WKRP in Cincinnati.
You see, I've got a theory about Murder, She Wrote. I have found out that Angela Lansbury is the most dangerous woman on the face of the earth.
Because if she shows up, a body's going to fall out of the closet.
Well, my theory is everywhere she goes, somebody dies, and they don't just die, they're murdered. And somebody else is always the one that's caught, and she's the one that catches them by some weird... Yeah.
Well,
I think she is a master killer and a master frame-up artist.
That's it. You knew Angela Lansbury was evil ever since you saw The Manchurian Candidate.
Yep.
The episode that I wrote for Murder, She Wrote had Robert Sterling and Ann Jeffries in what turned out to be their last joint appearance on television, and that was wild for me because I was crazy about Topper when I was a kid with Leo G. Carroll, and they played George and Marion Kirby, the ghosts that teased Topper, and they were married in real life and played a couple in my episode. So it was kind of cool and bittersweet that ended up being the last thing they did together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that show just it was a good show. All the things I've seen so far, and even Sidekicks. I remember
you
Sidekicks.
You even watched Sidekicks?
I watched Sidekicks.
Wow.
And looking back now, when I was back then, that was so amazing because one, I was into martial arts, and two, here's a kid doing it, and looking back now, I'm going, this premise is a little weird.
Yeah.
But it worked. It was such a good show.
And T. Luke was in it.
Mm-hmm. Ernie Reyes Jr. He was every kid's inspiration for being in martial arts. I think because he was 2.5 feet tall, just beating up everybody.
Yeah.
But it was a good one. And I know you've done some voiceover work since then.
Yeah, I've done cartoons and radio and announcing and narration on documentaries. Did a couple of the Peanuts specials. I did some voices for a TV special called Frosty Returns, and and that was like in the early '90s. And I remember thinking, maybe this will turn out okay. And every year they'll show it after they show the classic Frosty the Snowman. And sure enough, ever since then, every year CBS blocks out an hour and they show Frosty the Snowman and then Frosty Returns. And then I get a nice residual check several months later. So it's really cool that now this thing that I was a part of is now a part of all sorts of children's childhood memories of Christmas TV specials. And I got to work with John Goodman and Andrea Martin and Brian Doyle Murray. And the little girl, I mean, it's about a little girl who helps bring Frosty back to life to save the town. And she was talented, but I don't really remember vividly her personality. But it turns out she was Elizabeth Moss, who went on to star in Mad Men and The Handmaid's Tale, and she's now a big star as an adult, but at the time, she was like 9 or something like that, and was this talented little girl that grew up to be a talented big girl.
Nice. And I saw the Charlie Browns, and I'm like, man, that's neat. This guy can go, wah, 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 wah.
Well, yes, the muted trumpet.
Yep.
And also, it was great to be directed by Snoopy because Bill Melendez, who produced and directed those specials, was also the voice of Snoopy. He was a wonderful man, and he was another instance where it was jaw-dropping realizing his whole career. Because before he did Charlie Brown Christmas, which of course is the great 65 classic that started that whole cycle, he worked at Disney Studios in the 30s and 40s and Warner Brothers in the 40s and 50s. And that was just the golden era of animation for those studios. He doesn't always get credited when they roll by because they didn't always credit all the animators, but Bill was there for so much, and he was another case of being a very unassuming, down-to-earth guy. He shrugged off any kind of "you're a living legend" compliments, that sort of thing, and was just this guy, this really personable, down-to-earth guy, and he was the creative force, obviously, along with Charles Schultz, behind those Peanut specials.
Yeah.
But I didn't do the muted trumpet voices. I actually played I played the farmer that sells Snoopy to Charlie Brown in one of the specials, and just different miscellaneous voices when they need a voice coming from a radio or whatever, and I would do those. I did one of them. I did was about the Super Bowl, and it ended up being the only one where Charles Schultz shared a writing credit with, and it was with me, because they had put together the whole episode, and the production staff looked at it and realized there were big chunks that were just showing all these little Woodstock birds playing football back and forth and scoring points and all this, but it only had music, and it needed someone to explain what we were looking at. So they brought me in, and I just sat in front of the TV with the videotape recorder and a stopwatch, seeing how much time I had to write these words, and was sort of a sportscaster saying, well, we're here now for the AFL, the Animal Football League championship, and there he kicks it off to so-and-so. And I just wrote that narration and also voiced the sports announcer. And so on the Super Bowl show, my name as like additional dialogue or something like that rolls by. So that was a kick to be both writing and voicing for one of the Charlie Brown shows.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I grew up on Charlie Brown, and I didn't notice till my later years there is something in the Charlie Brown Thanksgiving that's a little bit disturbing. They show Woodstock Woodstock as a cannibal. You remember at the end of it, he sits down and Snoopy hands him turkey and he just starts eating.
Yeah, that's your cousin. Well, I guess you're not supposed to think too far into these things.
Yeah.
It's a good point, though.
Yeah.
Why would he want to eat a bird?
And, I know you've done the documentaries. I've got one question, though, that why Shemp?
One question on what?
Why Shemp? Are you
why Shemp?
Yep. Are you a big Shemp guy?
Well, I was working at a production company that regularly made pop culture documentaries and sort of box sets of films and TV shows and radio shows. And we had access to Shemp's daughter-in-law and granddaughter and home movies. And so I was tasked with interviewing them and editing the movies and putting out this, both about Shemp and then also discs with his work on it. And that was, Shemp was, first of all, he was one of the original Three Stooges. Most people know him as the guy that came in the late 40s when Curly died after having a stroke.
Yeah.
And then he was from the 40s to the mid 50s. But in fact, when the Three Stooges first started on the stage, it was Larry, Moe, and Shemp. And Shemp went off on his own, and Curly was brought in. And in fact, Shemp had the most successful solo career of any of them. I mean, he shows up. He actually stars in a number of short comedies. It says Shemp Howard. It doesn't mention the Stooges.
Mm-hmm.
And he shows up in The Bank Dick with W.C. Fields and Africa Screams with Abbott and Costello. And there were just a lot of, he did really well, and it was kind of a sacrifice for him to go back to being just one of the Three Stooges again, but they needed to keep the Three Stooges. You can't have the Three Stooges with Larry and Moe.
Yeah.
So he rejoined them. But, and I didn't hear any mean words about him, or apparently he was a really great guy. I remember his daughter-in-law telling me that he taught her the easiest way to butter corn on the cob is to take a piece of bread and spread the butter on the bread and then hold the bread in your hand and sort of wipe all around the corn cob, and that way you get it evenly distributed without the pad of butter slipping off onto your lap.
That's genius.
So these are important things to know, and would otherwise have been lost to the ages if she hadn't mentioned that in my interview with her. So, yeah, Shemp was one of a number of documentaries I helped put together.
Mm-hmm. Well, very cool. Well, Steve, I'm looking forward to having you back on here if you will come back. Anytime you want. It would
be my pleasure.
Anytime you want to be on here, just holler at me. You got this number. All you got to do is say, Fat Boy, I want to talk some more. And I'm here.
Well, thank you for letting me yammer on and on. And, in the unlikely event that any of your listeners want to get a signed copy of my Groucho book, they can order it from my website, Steve Stoliar, STOLIAR.com. But otherwise, as I say, easily findable on Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
It was a pleasure, man.
I've had a ball. And like I said, we're going to do this again.
Okay. Well, you take care of yourself, please.
All right. And same to you.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right.